Okay, here we go. So, yesterday I read um, just a couple pages out of Driven to Distraction, uh, book on ADHD, and just a, right away you could tell that there was some outdated information in there, and then I was like, wait a minute, I bought a book to replace this one that my stepmom gifted to me to give to her, and that book is actually revised. It's a revised edition from Anchor Books, and I believe it's 2011. So we're still, yep, 2011. So we're still, a decade behind with this book from what's been learned, but we're, you know, 15 years from the first one, which was known to be, yeah, because 1994, right? That's six, so that's 17 years, right? 2011, 1994. So a lot more information. So I'm going to try to make these quicker and then not interject as much with my own story. Um, let's see here. We're going to read the introduction. And I've only got about 20 minutes. 20 minutes? I've got almost 30, but we'll try to make this quick. Okay, here we go. Leading up to the publication of the first edition of Driven to Distraction in 1994, I remember a conversation I had with Jonathan Galassi, now the man in charge of the New York publishing house Farrar, Straus, and Giroux. Friends since high school and college, John and I confide in each other on just about everything. As an editor, John had concerns about this new book I was about to send out into the world. No one's heard of attention deficit disorder, and from the title, I'm worried people will think it's a book about cars. Nearly 2 million sales later, John and I still chuckle on the fallibility of even the most perspicacious, come on, of editors. That's a big word, dude. Why are you throwing that in there? Back in 1994, a few people had even heard of ADD. It was then called, or as it was then called. Now it's ADHD, soon to change again, no doubt. Those few who had heard of it didn't really know what it meant. It conjured up stereotypical images of hyperactive little boys disrupting classrooms and turning life at home into chaos. It was considered to be a condition found exclusively in children, almost all of whom were male. It was thought that children grew out of ADD so that it disappeared by adulthood. Only a rare few doctors knew that ADD could continue on in adults and that females could have it as easily as males. I learned about ADD in 1981, the first year of my fellowship in child psychiatry at the Massachusetts Mental Health Center in Boston. Before then, if you told me a person had attention deficit disorder, I would have thought it was some psychoanalytic concept that referred to children who didn't get enough attention. But then one of my teachers, Dr. Elise Freeman, gave us a lecture on ADD. That lecture changed my life forever. As I listened to Elsie, not Elise, it's Elsie. As I listened to Elsie speak, my jaw dropped. I had the greatest aha experience of my life. Elsie was describing me. At last, I found an explanation for the different ways I thought and behaved. I'd always excelled in school and college, so no one, including me, thought I had any type of learning disability. I knew I was a slow reader, and I have since pieced together that in addition to ADD, I also have dyslexia. But I never had understood why I came up with different ways of solving problems, why I had an intuitive approach to so much, why I tended to think outside of the box, why I could be so impatient so often, and why I was so quick to draw conclusions, why I had an oddball sense of humor, and on and on. Although I am now what I understand to be the classic version of a person who has ADD, I do have the condition for sure. Sorry, so those are, is there a squirrel up there doing that? Those are falling out of our oak tree. Acorns? The acorns fall out of oak trees? Because that's sure what they look like. They look like acorns. I feel, whatever. Again, a lot of information in the brain, none of it worth much. Where we go. More important, back in 1981, I realized that many more people had this condition than experts realized. I also knew it extended into adulthood. ADD became my subspecialty. I began to read papers about it and look for it in my patients. I also began a dialogue that continues to this day with my friend John Rady. I met John in 1979 when I was a first-year resident at Mass Mental. It was called at Mass Mental, as it was called, a state hospital that was also a Harvard teaching hospital. John was my chief resident, part mentor, part friend for that year. When I finished residency and started my training in child psychiatry, John and I remained in touch, meeting once a week to play squash and discuss what interested us. ADD became one of our lead topics. All through the 1980s and into the 90s, John and I explored the topic, comparing notes on patients, speculating what more went into ADD than was in the books. John also realized that he had ADD, so we made a quite logical pair to look into it in depth. And so he's the other author, right? Now again, anyone that's like, oh yeah, of course he saw it and he had ADD. We talked about this a little bit yesterday too. Like everyone can have the symptoms of ADD in the terms of forgetfulness and a lot of different things. But as far as it being a lifelong thing, that you're so distracted that's when the diagnosis comes in, is when it's something that happens so often and so much, instead of just like, oh, I get distracted sometimes. But if it's just a constant thing and it's lasted for years, that's when you, I mean, I guess I shouldn't speak like I'm the psychiatrist, but that's what I'm learning. So it's like, yeah, everybody can be distracted, but there's people that have it a million times worse, and there's different neurological makeup. Okay, anyway. There were no good books on the subject written for the general public at the time, so I began to write handouts to give to my patients. I'd stack them up on the floor of my office. After I'd written about 20 such handouts, it occurred to me that I ought to write a book. More and more patients of all ages were seeking help for ADD. Rather than reach only the few who found their way to my door, I wanted to write a book that could reach many more people. John encouraged me to do it. We brainstormed. Then I wrote a proposal, which was accepted. I was surprised that it was accepted by a trade book publisher because the topic was unknown to the general public. This was not a diet book, a cookbook, or even a book on common condition like diabetes or arthritis. It was a book about a condition most people had never heard of. As I worked on the book, I'd call John Rady now and then to let him know how it was going. He would give me encouragement when I'd inevitably ask, will anyone read this book? And he'd listen as I'd read him a paragraph or two and give feedback. But it was my wife, Sue, who had to listen to most of the book. Poor Sue. She had the impossible task of giving useful criticism, but also saying she loved the book. I'd get annoyed at her at every criticism, but I was smart enough to take every single one of them and make changes in the book. When the book came out, it sold briskly at first, because the ADD community had got word of it in advance. I figured we'd have quick bursts of sales and then it would settle into its obsolescence. But that didn't happen. Much as Elsie Freeman hit a nerve when she lectured about ADD to me, Driven to Distraction hit a nerve in the general public. People were ready to understand the symptoms of ADD, not as moral failings or evidence of badness or lack of discipline, but as a neurological condition not under the control of individual will. For some people, this was, and still is, heresy. The old moral model dies hard. It lives on in the minds of certain groups and individuals. At the heart of the moral model beats the conviction that willpower controls all human emotion, learning, and behavior. Under this model, the cure for depression is to cheer up. The cure for anxiety is to suck it up. And the cure for ADD is to try harder. While trying harder helps just about everything, telling someone with ADD to try harder is no more helpful than telling someone who is nearsighted to squint harder. It missed the biological point. But in 1994, with the moral model still shaping the public's view on ADD, many people attacked me for arguing that ADD derived from genes and biology, and not from bad parenting and weak character. I remember being on National Public Radio in the 90s with a psychiatrist by the name of Peter Breggin. The show originated in NPR's Boston studio. For an hour, Dr. Breggin harangued for an hour he said something. I can't even read that word. He attacked ADD as a bogus diagnosis concocted by the pharmaceutical industry and supported by irresponsible parents who wanted to excuse their children's poor behavior rather than step up and learn how to be good parents. I did my best to offer the science that proved my point of view to be correct, that ADD was a valid diagnosis, that its etiology is primarily genetic, and that while good parenting will help any child and bad parenting help harm any child, bad parenting certainly does not cause ADD. At one point, I remember asking Dr. Breggin, just to be clear, are you telling us that there is no such thing as true ADD, and that every case of what is diagnosed now as ADD is in fact simply bad behavior caused by bad parenting? For once, Dr. Breggin had a short reply. Yes, he said. When the show was over, we both walked out in the lobby of the NPR station. Dr. Breggin asked where his limo was to take him to the airport. He was told that limos for guests are not in the budget of NPR. Dr. Breggin got upset and repeated his request for a limo, this time quite emphatically. Rather than watch what was to happen next, I stepped in and volunteered to take Dr. Breggin to Logan myself. Since I live in the Boston area, I had my car outside. On the ride to the airport, Dr. Breggin and I had a genuinely pleasant conversation. I realized that he was a good man, simply defending what he thought was right. Many people back then agreed with him, and there's still people that do today. Fortunately, however, science intervened. The 1990s was the decade of the brain. Science uncovered more and more evidence, from imaging studies to genetic studies to family studies, proving that ADD was a true biological entity. Furthermore, ongoing studies prove that if undiagnosed and untreated, ADD can cause severe impairment. In other words, it was crucial to make this diagnosis and do something about it. In discussing what's happened over the past decade and a half with Dr. Russell Barkley, one of the leading researchers in the field, I was particularly interested in Dr. Barkley's comment that ADD is more impairing than any syndrome in all mental health that is treated on an outpatient basis. More impairing than anxiety, more impairing than depression, more impairing than substance abuse. The morbidity of untreated ADD is profound. 25% of the prison population has undiagnosed ADD. Most of the kids in juvenile justice system have untreated ADD. Traffic accidents are 8 times more common than in the general population. If you have ADD, you are 40% more likely to get divorced than if you don't, and 30% more likely to be unemployed. Estimates run as high as 40% of the addicted population having ADD, and a significant proportion of the eating disorder population. In other words, untreated ADD can be a disaster. I also asked Dr. Barkley what he sees as the leading developments in the field in the past 15 years. Beyond identifying the scope of the problem, he named the identification of ADD in adults as one leading issue. Here again, I've got to read that part again. What he sees as the leading developments in the field beyond identifying the scope of the problem. He named the identification as a leading issue. Oh, identification of adults, in adults. Okay, there we go. Here again, the need for education is paramount. 90% of adults who have the condition don't know it. If they did know it, they could transform their lives of struggle, underachievement, and turmoil to the lives of joy, fulfillment, and success, regardless of whether the person is a child as young as 5 or an adult as old as 85. The diagnosis of ADD can change a life dramatically for the better. As impairing as ADD can be if untreated, it can be hugely gratifying to get it treated. This is where my work focused on Driven to Distraction. This is where my work has focused since Driven to Distraction first came out. I'm a clinician, someone who sees patients on a regular basis, as well as an educator and a writer. It has been my mission to bring the good news of how profoundly a diagnosis and treatment of ADD can help individuals, couples, families, businesses, and other organizations. Now that most people in the general public have heard of ADD or ADHD, we need to help them understand what it is, what treatment is all about, how commonly it occurs in adults, how medication alone is not sufficient treatment, and how many positive attributes can emerge once treatments begin. I routinely see people surge from lives of struggle to lives of success once they get treatment for their ADHD. I see the positive attributes emerge and take over. Attributes like creativity, originality, the ability to think outside the box, tenacity and grit, big-heartedness, entrepreneurialism, and humor. I see careers turn around and marriages saved. I see children go from failing in 4th grade to the top of the class in 5th. I see children change from nervous, misunderstood underachievers to proud and confident leaders of the class. That's why the biggest change I've seen in the past 15 years is not the biggest change most experts have seen or the world at large knows about. Most people now acknowledge and see all too well the damage that ADHD can do, the impairment it causes, the school experiences it ruins, the careers it sabotages, the marriages it breaks up. I see all that too, but I see the progress, perhaps more clearly than anyone because I treat so many people of so many ages. I also see how essential a comprehensive treatment plan is, a plan that incorporates education, understanding, empathy, structure, coaching, a plan for success, and physical exercise as well as medication. So again, a comprehensive treatment plan, education, understanding, empathy, structure, coaching, a plan for success, and physical exercise as well as meditation. Okay. I see how important the human connection is every step of the way. Connection with the parent or spouse, with the teacher or supervisor, with the friend or colleague, with the doctor, with the therapist or coach, with the world out there. In fact, I see the human connection as the single most powerful therapeutic force in the treatment of ADHD. Led by Peter Jensen, MD, the Multimodal Treatment Assessment, MTA, study bears this out. The largest study done on the treatment of ADHD. The MTA study first identified the primary importance of medication in treating ADHD, but follow-up shows that the children who do best are the children who have positive human connections in their lives. We in psychiatry have been falling in love with our somatic treatments, especially medication, over the years since this book was first published, and rightly so. Medications have changed the face of treatment of all mental conditions for the better. But we must not forget the primary importance of the human connection. Put differently, love works. Positive human... It's all of a sudden losing connection and... What's happening? There we go. Are we back? Lost connection there. There we go. He says, I call it the other vitamin C. Vitamin Connect. And if you do not get enough of it, you will languish and never thrive. With the release of this new edition, John Ratey and I revel in the many new developments that have blessed the field. John himself has pioneered the emphasis on physical exercise not only as a superb treatment of ADHD, but as a brain booster in general. We've also learned how much more about ADHD in adults. So much more. About effective ways of educating the general public as well as physicians. We have seen the development of new, excellent medications, as well as new diagnostic tools. The history remains the best diagnostic tool, however. Now is the time to use all that we've learned to shine the light of knowledge into the dank, dark dungeons of ignorance and stigma that still retard progress in mental health and cause millions of people to suffer unnecessarily. Nowhere does the use of knowledge lag further behind the knowledge we have than in mental health. That must end now. Now is the time to cast fear aside. Now is the time to put an end to the shame individuals and families often feel when they seek help in the field of mental health. Using ADHD as a prime example, now is the time to show the world how many of its champions, its innovators, its titans, its benefactors and contributors, its leaders in every field that have ADHD or some other mental difference. Now is the time to tell the whole truth that embedded in what can be so problematic, we can find strength. Embedded in the mind of each person who has ADHD or bipolar disorder or anxiety disorder, one can find talents and strengths. It is upon those talents and strengths that the most successful treatment is built. Now is the time to blow the lid off the model that merely identifies pathology and to replace it with the more accurate and hopeful model that not only acknowledges the problems but also seeks and identifies the strengths as well. In explaining ADD, This book relies heavily upon examples drawn from life. Some of the accounts are composites, some are drawn directly from our patient's experience, and some are based upon interviews conducted for this book. In all cases, the names are fictitious. Again, we would like to thank the many individuals who shared their experience so that this book could be possible. We hope that since its publication, Driven to Distraction has dealt severe body blows to the Goliath of ignorance and stigma. Now let us all pick up our pebbles, aim carefully, and fell this Goliath once and for all. All right, so we made it. How many pages was that for the introduction? I'm just curious of how long this is going to take us. 1, 2, let's go this way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that was 8 pages that we got through in 21 minutes. How long is a chapter? We've got 3 to 49, right? So then that's 46 pages. And I was thinking that I could maybe read a chapter a day or something, right? Whoa. Got more acorns falling. So, what do we think of this? Driven to Distraction, right? So I think there's still going to be people that might be resistant to the medication side of things. And I don't think I'm going to argue that too hard. Like I don't think that's what I'm here for. I can tell you that I've been medicated for it, but then didn't do any of the other things. So I can tell like how much of a difference that it makes when you're taking the medication, but without the structure, without people understanding, without exercise. There's so many, like, again, the book even says medication is not enough. So I want to get into those things. Those are the things that I want to learn more about. And, you know, other ways to, you know, just kind of rein things in and understand what parts of this type of brain are harmful to me and where the strengths are, and then learn to try to protect myself and, you know, strengthen the stronger things and shield myself from some of the things that are harmful. So that's, again, that was the introduction of Driven to Distraction. I'm kind of excited to see where this goes. Looking forward to reading more and hope you guys are enjoying the rest. And of course, we should probably close with the puppy. Who's out here? Max? Mackie, you out here? Mackie? There's my boy. Come here. Come here. It's your baby. It's your baby. You said just be in a moment, Dad. Just be in a moment, man. Okay. All right. We'll see you later.